Hi everyone, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. Today's video is going to be my Contemporary-A-Thon wrap-up. It is Sunday, but I know I'm not going to finish another book today, so I thought I would do the wrap-up so I could get this edited and posted for you guys. And I wound up finishing 3 books. I did all 7 challenges, so I'm feeling very good about that. But I also had a bit of a struggle week, like it seems a lot of other people did too. So I was watching a lot of vlogs that people did, and clearly you're seeing me here, so I didn't vlog my experience. And it seems like a lot of people were just struggling this week in general, and I was one of them. So I had a hard time connecting with some books. I wound up actually going like off TBR at one point and trying 2 different audiobooks, thinking if I tried different titles and different medium I would connect, and that was a big old fail. I DNF'd both of those pretty early on. And I was kind of like reading first chapters of books and like just nothing appealed to me. So I hunkered down and I stuck with it, and I did finish all 3 of my books. One of them I very much enjoyed. The other 2 I didn't not enjoy. Like they were both just like good. One of them I struggled in and out of. I kind of kept putting it down and picking it back up again. But I will tell you all about that in a minute. But I also just sort of had like another rough week at work in that I feel like I'm still trying to find my feet. It's just a lot. It's just a lot of, you know, figuring things out. We had a super high profile event Friday morning. At the risk of being vague, because I have to be. Sometimes we get very high profile people who come in, and we did. And I had to get up at 4:30 on Friday morning so I could take a super early train so I could be there before the team of handlers and this person came in, and everything went great, which was wonderful, but it was a lot of stress this week. I'm not used to such a lack of structure kind of in how things work, and it's not a new company, but it feels very startup-y, and I am someone who has always worked in much more, well, not always corporate environments, much more established firms in terms of processes and how things are getting done. So I kind of feel like a kid in like a too big snowsuit who's like fumbling around, kind of. I feel like it's just a lot. So it wasn't my best week on all fronts. It ended on a high note, which was great, but it was just a lot of kind of like up and down and emotion and back and forth this week. So all that being said, I read a few books, and let's talk about them. So the first book I finished, even though it wasn't the first book that I picked up, is The Female of the Species, I don't know why I can't say that word, by Mindy McGinnis. And this book satisfied the yellow cover, the illustrated cover, and my recommendation from somebody on BookTube. And this is actually a book that Chelsea, from Chelsea Darling Reads, one of our hosts, has highly recommended from her channel. And I bought it a while ago based on her recommendation, and I loved it. And it's the first Mindy McGinnis I've ever read, and I actually wound up like doing half of it on audiobook and half of it I read. It was a really good audiobook experience. There's multiple points of view in this, and there's multiple narrators on the audiobook, which I love. And I really enjoyed the story. Though I will say this is a very heavy story. Trigger warnings for rape, for violence, a lot of violence, drinking, drugs, sexual assault, a lot. There's a lot of triggers in this. There's also, well, it doesn't play out on the page. 2 of the girls work at like an animal rescue, and often animals are brought to them after being abused and injured. So if you're sensitive to those things, be aware of that as well. Although our main characters are not causing the abuse, you're seeing the abuse to the animals. So there's a lot of really heavy things in this book. And it is pitched, I would say, as like YA. They're in high school. I want to say they're seniors in high school, and this is going to come full circle when I talk about another book, but this does not read young to me. I really enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed their voices. I enjoyed their stories. I was not cognizant of the fact that I was reading about teenagers, and I've talked about this on the channel before. Sometimes I read a book and it makes me feel really old because I haven't been a teen in a long time, but this was a book where I was just fully engrossed in the story. And I will not spoil anything, of course, because I don't, but the opening line of this, their main character, Alex, she says, "This is how I kill someone." And this is a book where the first sentence set the tone for me and did not disappoint me. And I've run into this with some other books too. I felt like this book was fearless. The author did not shy away from things that were ugly or difficult or like kind of hard to read or hard to write. She went deep. She went for it. She told a very authentic feeling story to me. And Alex is really struggling. And a few years ago, her sister was murdered, and the man who was accused of murdering her went free. So this, for all the reasons you can possibly imagine, has had a long-standing impact on Alex, and she is someone who's going to do something about it. So we enter the story, you know, from Alex's perspective, and then two of her classmates. The first one, her nickname is PK because she's the preacher's kid. Not her real name, but you'll find that out. You find out like PK is not her real name, but you eventually find out her real name. And then Jack, who is like sort of like this all-star athlete, and he and Alex are kind of vying for valedictorian, so they get to know each other, and it is sort of the evolution of their relationships and what happens to them. And Alex is someone who is very closed off and a loner, and she's got a lot of her own personal demons, obviously, that she's dealing with, things with her family. And you start to see sort of through these connections with Jack and PK, how she lets a few walls down, but still remains guarded. And it's just, I don't want to give anything away. I'm trying to like look on the back of it, so I make sure I don't say anything I shouldn't. But it's really how their stories unfold and how their friendships unfold, and some really dark, messed up stuff winds up happening kind of over the course of the year that we're watching their lives. And I have to say, I really enjoyed it. It is heavy content, but it is a powerful book. There are some powerful messages to this. Not surprising, probably, I wound up listening to a podcast with Mindy McGinnis, who now I'm gonna just like have some author love here. She is an author I've heard about because of this book, and she also wrote the book Heroine, which I'm officially going to read next. But she writes across genres, apparently seamlessly. Again, I've only read her first book, so I can't really vouch for that. But she basically writes what she wants to write and doesn't want to be pigeonholed into anything, and has a very interesting story about how she got published. You know, it took her 10 years to get a book accepted after writing many, many books. And I also wound up finding out that she has a podcast of her own called Writer Pants on Fire. And she has other authors on there, and they talk about their process. They talk about how they got their agent. They talk about their books. It's really interesting. And I have been sort of binge listening to that podcast since I found it, maybe like Tuesday. So if you're interested in learning more about Mindy McGinnis or anything, look up that podcast because it's great. But I find her very interesting as an author, and I also find her very fearless as a writer. So big fan all around. I would definitely recommend this book, but again, beware the triggers, because this is not an easy read, but it is an extremely important, I think, worthwhile one. The next book I read is Dress Codes for Small Towns by Courtney Stevens, and this is a book that also has an illustrated cover. It is my hard-hitting contemporary. It was also a huge recommendation from Kayla at Books and Lala. This is her favorite book ever, and it piqued some curiosity with me. Again, I align a lot with Kayla's reviews of books, and we seem to like a lot of the same things, so I wanted to pick this one up, and this seemed like a great time to do it. And I found it on Hoopla, so that was a nice surprise. And this is actually the first book I picked up for Contemporary-A-Thon, and I had a very hard time connecting with this book, and I wound up putting it down and picking it up, and I finally finished it last night because I wanted to see how it ended. Although I feel like if it wasn't a book that had come highly recommended by somebody whose opinion I respect and value a lot, / I wasn't trying to read it as part of a readathon, I would have DNF'd this book hands down. But I was driven by the fact that there had to be something about this book that made it her favorite book ever, and I was like committed to finding out what that was. And at the end of the day, I wouldn't say that it was a bad book. I would say this is a book where I felt keenly aware of the fact that I was not a teenager. And if we compare, so Female of the Species, hard-hitting, small town, seniors in high school, discovering themselves, discovering one another, just very exploratory kind of a book. And I'm trying to be a little bit vague, although violence in this book. Just Goes for Small Towns does not have the violent aspect to it, but it is a group of friends. I don't even know for sure. I want to say they're juniors or seniors in high school. Juniors or seniors. They're driving cars, so they're juniors or seniors in high school. And it is about the friend group. It is about letting your walls down. It is more of an exploration about sexuality and sexual fluidity and sort of finding out who you are and sort of where you belong, and more of sort of a personal exploration in that sense. And I was completely intrigued by it, and I wanted to, you know, read about it. And where I struggled was that, so it's this group of 5 friends or 6 friends, 6, because they call themselves the Hexagon. Learn your numbers. So our main character is this girl named Billy, and it is her and her best friends, Janie Lee, and then these 4 boys. It's all nicknames. It's Woods, 50, Davy, which is not really a nickname, and Mash. I'm looking down because I can't remember their names, and I, for the life of me, can't distinguish between Mash and 50 in the book. And I very much enjoyed the friendship between Billy and Davy. And Davy is the cousins of one of the other boys. He winds up moving to the town when his parents get divorced, and he had been living in Nashville. He'd been going kind of like to this private school, and he's struggling with sort of missing his friends from his old school and kind of his old life and fitting in this small town where his grandfather lived. So he used to come there all the time in the summers, but he kind of had this whole other life, which has gone kind of to bits because his parents got divorced. And I really enjoyed Billy and Davy together. I liked their chemistry. I liked them kind of trying to figure each other out. I liked kind of the adventures that they went on. And when we got exposure to Davy's Nashville world with his best friends, Tom, it's like funny, it's Tom and Jerry. Jerry's a girl, Tom's a boy. And kind of how they sort of push Billy a little bit and kind of open up her eyes to kind of this whole new world, and you know, being more comfortable with herself and kind of pushing herself in a lot of ways. So I very much enjoyed that part of the book. But like the other part of the book, I enjoyed pieces of it less. And I felt like just when I was getting into something, we'd like switch to a scene that pulled me out of it. And much like in Female of the Species, where one of the main characters is the preacher's kid, here Billy's dad is, I don't know if he's a minister, or I'm looking at Female of the Species for an answer. So you have, like, you know, one of the kids whose father is very involved in the church. There's a lot of church religion in this, which is neither here nor there, but that pulled me out of it because that's not something that I am involved in, which is not to say I can't read books that explore it, and that was part of what made it diverse to me, kind of in addition to the sexual fluidity and sort of Billy's discovery of herself, I would say, and a lot of the characters kind of trying to discover, like I say, who they are and you know, who their people are and where they fit in, and being seen for who they are and being accepted for who they are. So I enjoyed that concept of it, but I had a really hard time staying in the story. And it's frustrating to me because, again, there were parts of the story I really enjoyed. There's some great lines in this. There's definitely some great emotion to it, but it all sort of centers around like this harvest festival and the kids like trying to save the harvest festival. And I don't know, I just felt very distracted by it. So definitely not my most favorite book ever. And I don't know if I read this at a different time in my life, if maybe that would have been different. And I mean, it only came out a couple of years ago, so it's not like I could have read it when I was younger, but you know what I mean. If I was younger now, would this have hit me in a different way? So I don't know, I feel like very neutral. There's parts about it that I liked. I definitely, like I said, and this always like hurts me to say this, but like if I wasn't reading it based on a recommendation from someone else and sort of still looking for that magic thing that made it amazing, I would have DNF'd this book. So it also kind of made me think about, you know, like, well, I was reading this, and again, I read this first, and I'm, you know, at the beginning when I wasn't connecting with it, I just kept saying to myself, like, you're not meant to read YA. Like, YA is not your thing. Why are you forcing your square peg in this round hole? But what I came to realize when I picked up Female of the Species and then like fully committed to that and finished it in 2 days between the audiobook and the physical book is that it's not about the genre of book. It's always about the story for me. And that's what I need to focus on. And I think I've seen that this year by sort of widening my scope by reading more books that would be, you know, classified as YA, or more sci-fi fantasy with V.E. Schwab, and just books that I normally would not pick up. So again, it's not about the genre, it's about the story. And while this story is 100% going to work for other people, it just sort of left me feeling fine. The last book that I finished is Things You Save in a Fire by Catherine Center. And this was an arc that I got. This book actually came out in August. I'm just late to reading it. So you can get this one right now. It's out to be purchased. And I also think it's a book of the month book. I want to say I saw that on Krista from Books and Jams. I think she just picked it up. I don't do book of the month, but I'm pretty sure you can get it there too. And this is contemporary, kind of like some family drama-ish, I would say. So what intrigued me about this, other than the fact that I've heard great things about Catherine Center and her first book, How to Walk Away, which you can get on Hoopla also on audio, which I'm interested to check out. But this is about a woman named Cassie. She is a firefighter in Austin, and her parents got divorced when she was 16, which was, I want to say, like 10 years ago. And her mom kind of calls her up and asks her to, Cassie wound up living with her dad when her parents got divorced. And her mom asks her to come up to Massachusetts. She lives outside of Boston. She's having some medical issues and she needs Cassie's help. And Cassie has kind of never forgiven her mom for walking out on her and her dad. So she doesn't want to do it. But circumstances kind of force her hand a little bit and she winds up moving. And it's sort of a dual story of the relationship of Cassie and her mom, and, you know, how they relate to each other and how they cope with what happened in the past, and sort of getting to know who her mom is, and forgiving her, forgiving each other. So there's like a big forgiveness theme. And then it's also about Cassie joining this small town fire department, and she is this amazing firefighter and paramedic, and she's won a bunch of awards in Austin, and she had a great team down there, and it was diverse, and they had modern technology, and it was welcoming, and they were a true family. And she enters this kind of small town fire department in Boston, which is all men, a lot of them older, a lot of them grew up in this town, they are firefighter families, and they have no interest in having a lady join the team. So she is dealing with all of these aspects of it. And the day she starts, there were these two brothers who retired together. So there's two new people who joined the force. It's her, and then it's this other firefighter who is just referred to as the rookie for a long time, who comes from a long line of firefighters from this house, so they know him. So he is instantly welcomed, even though he has no idea what he's doing. And Cassie, who has tons of experience behind her, is second guessed and questioned and shunned. Like, she literally sleeps in a supply closet and not out with the other firefighters, because they just want to have nothing to do with her. So we see sort of her relationship there, and kind of her fighting with these men and fighting to prove herself. And on the flip side, we see her, you know, kind of mending this relationship with her mom. So there were a lot of things about this book that intrigued me. And I will say it has been a long time, it seems like, since I have read kind of like a straight up, like softer book. And I can best describe this book as what I would think of as like a Hallmark movie, is how it felt to me. And I don't mean that as a ding. I live for Hallmark movies and mysteries. I like when things get tied up sometimes. You know, sometimes you just need some lightness. And what I will say about this book, again, well, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the writing. It was a fast read. There were definitely some good lines in this. There was some good like emotion evoking in this. I liked Cassie as a character. she is strong and she is determined and she just is like no nonsense and not taking shit, and she has a nice character arc and a nice evolution. I think, again, when I talk about like, it's all about the story for me, I missed some darkness. And this is more about me than it says about anything else. I just felt like it was too happy in some ways. And even though there are some bad things that happen, some things are only just alluded to. You can kind of read between the lines about things. And again, I said it earlier in this video, like I like when an author goes there, and it doesn't have to be dark and graphic and violent kind of goes there, but I feel like sometimes people play it a little bit safer, and I feel like there was a bit of safety to this book, which doesn't make it a bad book, but I'm always looking for like a little bit more, and I was missing the little bit more. So I was completely satisfied with it. I'm glad I read it. Like I said, I will read / listen to her other book, which I've heard great things about, and I think it's just, it's a little bit of kind of like a family feel-good book, but also a very strong main character in it. This satisfied my flowers. This satisfied my 2019 new release for my challenges that I had. So this is definitely has a lighter vibe, lighter feel to it. So if that's your thing, I totally think that you should pick this one up, and I think that you would enjoy it. Okay, so one more thing I just wanted to say about Things You Save in a Fire. And if you haven't read it and you don't want to hear some spoilers, then I will put down below what you should skip forward to. But I feel like I can't fully talk about this book without saying something. So here comes a little bit of a spoiler. And this is what I struggled with in the sense of it not being for me. So some of it I felt was a little bit predictable. And like, I can deal with predictable sometimes. Sometimes I guess things that are going to happen and it's okay. But this book, in the Hallmark sense, was wrapped up in a very pretty bow at the end. And like, everybody got a happy ending. Everybody was okay. Everybody got their due. You know, the good guys won, the bad guys were punished. There was an excuse for everything. There was an explanation for everything that was clean and that you could sort of like forgive the person for. And that to me is what didn't feel real. So to me, it's like, you don't go to rehab and poof, you're better. You know, the bad guy who's gotten away with stuff for 10 years doesn't suddenly get caught for something and he's getting, you know, he's getting what was coming to him, and, you know, kind of all of these things, and everybody's in love at the end, and everybody's happy at the end, and everybody's life works out in the end, and everything's perfect at the end. And to me, that just is not authentic, and that's, I didn't struggle with it, but that's what made it not be like, and I love this book to bits kind of a book, but that I liked it. I liked it for what the story was. You know, it did what it was supposed to do, but again, I felt like it was very Hallmark movie in that sense, and if you go in looking for a Hallmark movie, that's what you're gonna get. I feel like if you go in expecting a little bit more kind of like authenticity and tension and not everything working out perfectly for everyone in the end, you're not gonna get that. So I feel like it's more about just knowing your expectation. And if that's your expectation, great. And like I said, I'm taking it for what it is, and I'm enjoying it for what it is, and putting kind of the other thing aside. But at the end of the day, I much more enjoy an ending that isn't always necessarily happy for everybody. I feel like somebody's got to get hurt. Something's got to not end well for someone. Even if it's just like you don't get the job you wanted. Like, it doesn't have to be deadly, it doesn't have to be violent, it doesn't have to be rough. But I feel like it never works out perfectly for everybody in the end. So that's that. But I hope you guys had a great Contemporary-A-Thon. If you did participate, I hope you read some great books. I hope you weren't amongst those of us who struggled, but if you did, that's okay. It's all part of the deal. So I will see you guys really soon. Thank you for hanging out today and listening to the ramble as always. And let me know which book you did read, Contemporary-A-Thon or not. If you finished something this week that you loved, didn't love, if you had a hard time connecting with things, let's talk down below about all that good stuff. And I will see you soon. Bye guys.